Hey everyone, welcome back to the Long Toss Walkoff podcast. Episode 311. We're joined by a great panel. I'll let you go around and introduce yourselves. We'll start with you, Pat. Why don't you introduce yourself?
Hello, I am Pat McDonald. I am a comedian, a stand-up comic for 16 years now, originally from Toronto. And unfortunately, I live near Hamilton, Ontario now. So those of you familiar, that is a major step down.
Always a pleasure to have you, Pat. I heard it was your first time this year, so thank you so much for taking part.
Thank you for having
Unfortunately,
me.
it's not with better standings, but we'll keep trekking on. Baseball Jen, obviously a fan favorite and a episode or show regular. Thank you so much for being on. How are you feeling this week?
Not bad, not bad. I've found that the Blue Jays games make for great white noise if you need to take a nap. So I'm well rested.
And moving right along, top right corner. Why don't you introduce yourself, brother?
Well, let's see. Jeff Morton from the 40/40 Men, but now again the 40/40 Man, but I really don't feel like changing all of our stuff. It's been an interesting week. That's all I got to say. And I'm now in the big picture phase of watching this team. I don't really see it you look at individual performances, and mine's been sucking, so I'm hoping theirs are going to get a little bit better. And Pat, you're a very funny dude, man. I've seen you before.
Oh, whereabouts?
Online actually. Your
Oh,
stuff's up
okay.
here and there. Like I used to run a Yuck Yucks for years, so
Oh, cool.
yeah, so I know the guys.
I've,
So
I've gotten much worse, but thank you. I appreciate that.
It's usually how it goes with comedy. You slowly
yeah.
get to the top and then you slowly decline.
Oh yeah.
Back to baseball. Let's get right into it. As you had alluded, there's going to be a lot of big picture stuff today. We're going to talk about the Jays A series, Vladdy's hit streak, which is no more. Get into Kirk and his hot streak, what the lineup looks like tomorrow, or sorry, not tomorrow, next year. Mark Shapiro did a presser. I'm sure we're all thrilled to rip on that. We'll go through our topics in our Mariners Minute and a couple other topics if we have time. Let me toss it to you there, Jen. Jay's A series breakdown. Did you catch any of it? Do we feel any sort of anything around this team right now when it comes to the actual games in 2024?
I'm also like Jeff, a bigger picture person at this point, right? I think that the most important thing to look forward to right now is that off season and see what happens. See what I'm assuming it'll be Shapiro and Atkins still at the helm, just based on the rhetoric and what we've been hearing. And I think that's really what fans have to look forward to at this point, is just seeing what the offseason ends up looking like. So, aside from seeing, individual performances or being able to evaluate some of the young talent and see where they might fit in and that sort of a thing. I mean, the Jays are, I believe, 10 games below 500 right now. They were 10 games below 500 before the trade deadline. So nothing's changed, right? In that regard.
Yeah, let me toss to you here, Pat. When it comes to, seeing how they've kind of maintained that 10 games under 500 since the trade deadline, are you of the mindset of, you're kind of hoping that you actually lose a little bit more to improve your, reverse standings when it comes to the draft, or do you still want to see this team compete?
My understanding is that the rules recently changed where it's somewhat of a lottery system now. So I mean, I'll be honest with you, I stopped caring probably 6 or 7 weeks ago about whether they win or lose, because it's just like you have the Yankees and you have Baltimore, and they're neck and neck to win the East. The Jays are in the toilet. So for me, the answer would be no. And there were only really two things, and I will probably get to it later, that I've cared about over the past number of weeks. One was Vladdy's hitting streak, and two, I'm pretty big on Spencer Horwitz. And so for me, I just want to see him get some Rookie of the Year votes. Like, that's it. So yeah, I really, really don't care at this point.
Let me toss it over to you, Jeff. Do you think that Horowitz has done enough and has been up with the big league team long enough to garner Rookie of the Year votes?
Yeah, actually, he leads all rookies, at least last I checked, in on base percentage this year for 369. I mean, that's not saying nothing. Whether he gets enough at bats, I think that's going to be what it comes down to at this point, whether he's played enough. But I think he has played himself at this point onto the team. as opposed to like a David Schneider who might be playing himself off the team, and Addison Barger, who we're not really sure about. He's great when he came back, but he's really bad when he's out before. So Horowitz has basically, I think, solidified himself as the best Buffalo call-up out of all the guys that have come up so far. And I think the guy who has the best potential to continue a major league career.
I
The
wish we
question
would.
is, where is he going to play?
I wish we would have set an over-under to see how many rookies would have been on the Blue Jays roster at the trade deadline or after the trade deadline at the start of the season, because I don't think anybody would have guessed the number would be as high as it's been this year for this team. Checking in with the ground screw. We're just at 20. I'm sure we'll get a bunch more coming in. They may not tune in nearly as much this week because Scott's not here. It's fine. He's the favorite. I get it. We alluded to it a little bit. Vladdy has been red hot, obviously. He was on a hitting streak. It ended today, I believe, at 22. Does that provide a little bit of excitement for the fans and being able to still grasp onto the last 2 months of the baseball season? Jen, why don't you go?
Yeah, I think everybody, in this fan base and across Major League Baseball, like, want to see him succeed, right? This guy has been talked about for years, and what his potential ceiling might actually be in comparisons to his father. And he's the linchpin of the around whom you build a team, right? Like, there's been all that rhetoric. There's been a lot of pressure on him for several years now, and he's still a pretty young guy. And so to see him go off the way that he has, I think does generate excitement around what his future might be, right? And then also just keeps that conversation going, that narrative of, will the Jays extend him, right? Will that get done? And whatever side of the fence you fall on with that, and should they or shouldn't they, or what would that number even look like to try to lock him down? And would he even bother signing it, or does he want to go to free agency? Like that kind of generates a little bit of a talking point as well, right? Like, that is something that at least fans can get into and get excited about, and debate. And so, yeah, I think it's meaningful. I think that he's, put himself right, like, obviously, with what Aaron Judge and Juan Soto and who, are doing, and the fact that the Jays are so far out of it, you're not talking about Vladdy in terms of like MVP, but you're seeing MVP like play from him, right? And I think that's something.
I think it's also a lot of guys, like, I always go back to Ronald Acuna Jr. because he's kind of been on the same plane. He came in early, he wasn't very good. There was a little bit of a lull, and all of a sudden he just came on like gangbusters. And I've always expected that from Vladdy because he's 25. Like, he's 25 years old. He's been in the league since he was 19. Like you said, Jen, he's still a young kid, and now he's going to be coming on free agency. I'm curious because Vladdy's dad was here, right, for one of the series, and I'm wondering why he's here. I'm wondering if it's to pick the kid's brain or maybe help him negotiate what he might be wanting in terms of an extension. I mean, I don't think he was here for Caravana because he was there a week late, right? So would he have been there possibly to help him decide what he wants to do?
When Vladdy said that he had, he would play for the Yankees if he was traded there, and he kind of walked his initial comments back just a slight bit, he did mention that he had spoken with his dad and his uncle, right? And that this is a business. But given the time of year, I don't know that they're necessarily talking. I mean, I'm sure they're always talking business, but
I think that's what it is. I think it's not like a let's sit down at the table kind of thing, but I think it might be to start picking the brains in person. Because I've always said, like, I'm not a texting dude. I hate texting conversations and that kind of stuff. I need to look somebody in the eye. So I think Vladdy's dad, being old school, could be that kind of guy. I want to talk to Mark. I want to talk to Ross and see what their intentions are for my kid. If I see something weird, I'm going to tell him to just wait till free agency, which I think he should, but I don't think he will. I think they're going to bring up the bank for him. I don't see how they could do anything but.
They had, like, you think about, I don't know what the number is exactly, something like $500 million in renovations on the stadium.
And they're going to do a new scoreboard, apparently, they said on this press conference.
Well, there you go.
Because they just did one.
If you get rid of him, who's showing up to your fancy, like, who's worth watching? Like, one of the few bright spots this season was, the streak he's been on over yes, the past 22 games, but really the past 6 or 7 weeks where he's just been lighting it up. And so it's very reminiscent to me about the years of Carlos Delgado, where it's like, oh, I went to the
Yeah.
Jays game, 2 games on the weekend. Delgado hit 4 home runs and they lost the other one. Like that's what's the other attraction? Bo has been injured and just, pardon my language, dog shit this year. I imagine that has to do with the injury. Who are you showing up to see? Especially at this point, like they moved a bunch of players.
Pat,
Yeah.
let me ask you this. Is there any way, shape, or form, any number that convinces Vladimir Guerrero Jr. to surpass exploring free agency next offseason? Is there any way
Yes.
that could get done?
400 or
Yes.
500 million.
500 million dollars
Yeah.
over 12 years. That
500
Yeah.
over 12.
Because he's not
That's
going to get Otani money, obviously.
Yep,
Right?
absolutely.
So,
That was the
but
benchmark.
he'll get the step down from the Otani money.
Exactly. I'm 100% with you there. Like you're not gonna. I listen to sports radio here whenever I'm driving, and I've heard things like 300 million over 11 or 12. Absolutely not.
Yeah.
Like
Not
in
anymore.
arbitration this coming season, I should say, he'll be getting at least 25. So do you really think he's going to sign for a decade or more for like 30 a year? Absolutely not. It's not happening.
Yeah,
So
there's
based
no
on your
hometown
number-
discounts for Rogers. Like I'm telling
Yeah.
you, this is going to be I think Ed Rogers wants to be that Steinbrenner type guy. I think he wants to be more involved than he is. And I think doing the Vladdy thing will be the very first thing. If he keeps Vladdy here, it gets his face out there because he craves that stuff. I'm surprised he hasn't been out more showing his face about this team because he's all ego. So he'll spend whatever it takes. He'll just take it to the board of directors and be like, yeah, sure, it's a write-off, whatever. Like this doesn't cost Rogers anything. So if they were willing to do 7 to 750 for Otani, 500 for Vladdy's easy.
Yeah, and I mean, speaking of the Rogers family, if they don't bring him back, and those who know, that statue of Ted Rogers is going right into the lake.
Just like Egerton Ryerson at Ryerson University, just yanked right off its pedestal.
There it is.
12 years, 500 million breaks down if it's evenly spread out across the 12 years, 41.66 million a year. I could be wrong, and maybe the grounds crew can fact check me here, but I think that would be the highest paid position player. And that's factoring in Otani as a pitcher, obviously. But I think
right.
Verlander, Scherzer, that
I think
might
that's it.
be it in that range.
Yeah, I think that's it. And the thing, like Jeff said, he's 25. And no, he's not going to be hitting 490 for a full season. I mean, but it's not just the production on the field. It is the goodwill with the fans. If you let him go, it's like, okay, these guys don't care about they just want my money. They do not care about winning. And I will say Atkins and Shapiro, as much as I don't like them, they have made a number of very good acquisitions. They've made some terrible trades, and they've not picked up players who I think they should have when they had the opportunity. It seems as though they're trying to win. And the way I view them, and I was thinking about it earlier today, is if you look at the Toronto Raptors, for years and years, they had Kyle Lowry and DeMar DeRozan, both now 6-time All-Stars. They couldn't get past the Eastern Conference Finals. They should both be in the Hall of Fame when their careers are done. And you look at the Toronto Maple Leafs, they have this very top-heavy roster where they're, the big four. But it's not about having a bunch of great players. It's about having the right players. And that's what they failed to do. They're not addressing the things they need to. And they definitely overcorrected by taking a defense first approach, because now they can't hit the ball.
I just don't think they understand chemistry. They don't. Because like I said, two robots aren't gonna be good at creating chemistry amongst 26 dudes or a 40-man roster or whatever. They took away and it shows. I mean, again, I don't care. The Lourdes and Teo trades, long gone, don't care. I get why they did it. I understand the reasoning being, last contract, whatever, but that was the chemistry that went away. I mean, they could sign Teo back maybe to be a DH next year. I don't know, but that really decimated the psyche of people. And I think we've talked about this before. Like Bo just looks disinterested all year long. Like he knows that they're going backwards and not forwards, and you can kind of feel it in the room, and that's what I think is happening right now. They know how to get talented dudes, but they don't mesh together very well, and they're all. And this is the thing I used to think was a good thing, but I'm not so sure now. Is they all have positional flexibility, which is great to a point, but I don't think all your guys have to play 3 positions. I just think that's too much.
That's your
Yeah,
bench players. Like you want
let
your
me
bench players, you want to have a guy who can play second, short, and third. That's your Kiner Falefa.
Yeah.
You don't want to have 3 starters who are bouncing around. Like, so yeah, I'm with you.
Jen, let
Is
me
that Jen?
talk to you. I want to ask you a question here. Do you think that there would be more reporting and more discussion around the number that Vladdy will command in free agency if it wasn't for Soto this offseason? Or do you think we just have to wait until next year to have any sort of idea as to what kind of range he's looking for, what kind of range, Rogers and Shapiro are putting on him? What do you think there?
I mean, nothing's been leaked to this point, right? And I don't know how serious the discussions have gotten between the two sides, but to this point, nothing has leaked other than that they've never been close. Like there has not been any sort of significant headway because they're not close. And I think the fact that they went to arbitration over $1.5 million tells you how far away the two sides are. I don't think there's any chance he's going to be offered a $500 million contract. I agree that he would take it if they did, but I absolutely do not believe that that is what they are going to offer him. And I really think if they were going to, if this was going to get done, I think it would have gotten done by now. I don't think a player of his caliber gets to being 1 year away from free agency and then denies himself the opportunity to see what free agency has to offer. That doesn't mean that he won't then sign with the Jays, but I think he will want to see what the other 29 teams, how they value him, right? And what they are making promises of in terms of where he fits into their organization and how they're building a winning team around him. I think he will want to see all of that before making a decision. And that's just good business.
Do you
right?
think he might? Do you think he might sign a shorter term if they offered him like 3 or 4 years to buy out a couple of years of his free agency?
Not
Like,
at this point, no.
You don't
Like,
think so?
especially the way he's playing now, even if he hits, 250 the rest of the way and hits, they have about 50 games left.
Well,
Let's say
that's
he hits
why.
8 more home runs. There's no way.
Well, that's why I asked, because part of the reason I think Jen, you might actually be right, is because how bad his 2023 and 20, not bad, I mean comparatively, like he was still above
compared
average.
to, yeah.
Exactly, right? So he's now doing what he did in 2021, but there's no continuity to it. Is he going to do it again next year? So yeah, I could agree that could bring the price down, because this hasn't been a 21, 22, 23, 24. I think it's been a 2021, 2024, and he was an above average dude for the other 2 years. And the other thing is, if we keep Spencer Horwitz, does he go back to third? Because obviously this is now a thing. So just Horwitz
It
take over
shouldn't
at first.
be a thing,
I know it shouldn't
in my
be.
opinion.
No, it shouldn't be. I think they'll end up with Horowitz at second. Personally, I think that's where
Yeah,
they'll put him,
100
because everybody else
100%.
plays second base. But the question is, we need an outfield. You know, what we should get, if you want to show him you're really, really serious about doing this, you get Anthony Santander, because I think he's a free agent, switch hitter next year, and he's having like a massive year this year. And you have to sign another starting pitcher, obviously, and a couple guys in the bullpen for sure. That's just the bare minimum to show him that you're willing to do something. But
I
you
think
still
you
need a
need-
real third baseman.
You need
Well,
2 starting pitchers, I would say.
Yeah, at least.
But yeah, I mean, that's one of the only things I think that would play to the Jays' advantage, is because it's almost a sure thing that he going forward will be a first baseman, and they just don't get paid, what a third baseman of the same caliber hitter would get paid. It's obviously a more premium defensive position. But thinking about it, gosh, isn't it a shame that there wasn't a former Jays player who was here for 2 years, who has a wins above replacement of 4.8 this year, that they possibly could have re-signed and didn't? Matt
What are we
Chapman.
talking about, Pat?
Matt Chapman.
Chapman's. We've got Dalton Varsho for that. all defense. Like, I mean, Matt hits a little bit better. He's on a wicked streak right now, but he wasn't hitting a lick for at least 2 months, if not
More than
longer
2
than that.
months. But the
You know
thing
what I
is,
mean?
it's a
So
long
it
season,
goes
but
back
like
to
you look at how streaky Vlad was, or streaky his season has been, right? But it's
Yeah.
the overall value, because different players will get hot and cold at different times. And I was one of the few Matt Chapman advocates last year where, like, yeah, he hit very poorly for,
5
I would
months.
say, probably 75% of the season. And I get that.
90.
But I mean, that's a bit of a stretch, but agreed.
And he may not have wanted to sign with Toronto, right? So
And that's what I think.
who knows? That's been my assumption
I
as
think
well.
if the money was right, though, like, and I could be wrong. I don't know. I've never met
They'd
them.
have to overpay.
Yeah, exactly. If the money's right,
Sure.
Checking in on the grounds crew here. Gonna look in with the chat. Vlad, the Sebi says Vlad would have had to hit 40 plus dingers with nearly 1,000 OPS for a few years at third to get close to 510. New Brunswick, Canada guy, regular viewer, says, I would rather pay big for a 25 or 26-year-old rather than a 30-year-old. I'm pretty sure everybody agrees with that one there. There was one question from Augustino I would like to discuss a little bit, and it is, what type of contract do you think Bo will command? The fact of the matter is, he did not have a good season. I think that was a large part in his health and his numbers as to why he didn't get traded this trade deadline. But the history in the last 4 years would suggest that he should command a $300 or so million contract. Let me throw to you there, Jen. Any thoughts on what Bo's contract might look like?
Honestly, no, I don't know. Partly because this season was so terrible, and soft tissue injuries are really hard to evaluate, right? Moving forward. So I don't know what his medicals look like. If he returns for any portion of this season, what does that look like? I wouldn't even begin to speculate. But to go back to something, I think, Pat, you said it about, one of you said it, I'm sorry, I don't remember, about how, Bo looked checked out this season because he could see that the team had taken a step backwards rather than a step forward.
Mhm.
I would suggest that if Bo and or Vlad are talking to the front office about an extension, that is at the front of their mind. Like, the front office is going to have to prove to them what the plan is moving forward and convince them that that is an actual plan that will lead to success. Because at this point, what faith do they have in the front office, right? After the past 2 seasons, and this season in particular, what faith do they have that things will be significantly better next year and moving forward? On top of that, there's uncertainty because Shapiro only has 1 year left on his contract. Atkins has 2. And so then, do you see what I'm saying? Like, that continuity certainly isn't there. I feel like this is one last ride or die season for all of them.
I'm with you. It was Jeff who said that, but I'm definitely in agreement. All us white guys look the same. I get it. I don't take offense.
That's why I wear the white beard. People,
I'm getting there. I shaved for the first time in like a month the other day. We would look somewhat similar.
The baby face, man. That baby face.
But when oh no, I'm a smoker. Their filters, trust me, not pretty over here. But in turn, just to Bo's contract, what that looks like, I'm positive that there will be at least, probably multiple offers and negotiations between him and the Jays. To Jeff's point, I agree. He does seem very disinterested. The reasons why, I can't be sure. But I don't think he is here beyond next season. I don't know if he's here at the end of next season, this time next year.
I'm not. I think it depends on how his season starts next year. I mean, if he becomes a tradable chip, but if he keeps it down, like if he's having another season like he's having this year, he probably signs a couple more years to try and prove himself. You know what I mean? Like that kind of thing. But that's the only way that it would happen.
I think he would sign a prove it deal somewhere else.
Yeah.
You think so?
And I think that was going to be my follow-up and kind of what Pat mentioned too. Obviously, we got to see, where he lands next year if he gets traded and what kind of performance and health he has next year to really determine what it's going to look like. But I was going to ask yourself, Pat, there, if he is potentially going to have to go into free agency and take a 1-year prove it deal because of all the bad juju around him. And it's not just his numbers, it's his health and it's his attitude. And we don't know for sure that there's an attitude problem, but that's definitely how it's portrayed. And a lot of the times when there's smoke, there's fire to these sorts of issues internally within the clubhouse and that relationship with the front office. Do you think that there's a possibility that Bo went from being a potential $300 million contract guy to having to sign a 1-year prove it deal?
He doesn't. He think of Bo. I've noticed just in general, he doesn't talk much. Like
Yeah,
you
but
see a lot of interviews
that could
with,
be a
with other,
personality thing, you know,
and I
because I'm
think
a
that's
pretty quiet guy myself.
yeah,
So
like that's part of it. But I think I I just think he's constantly in his head. I think I think he's a very cerebral person, and if he feels in his head that the energy's not right, like I think he's a cerebral energy type guy, right? And if he doesn't feel it's going to work, then he just kind of gets on himself about it. Um, I think he's going to come back. I think the injury had more to do with his problems than anything else because of the way he swings. Right? There's so much torque in his swing. I'm not surprised that that's the problem because the problem came back and got worse. Right? So I think that's part of it. And Jen's right. Soft tissue injuries, you never know. I think he needs a full heal to come back next year and see what he can do. Yeah, but you're right. He'll play out his contract for sure. Um, I wonder if him and Vladdy will have discussions. Are him and Vladdy even as close as they used to be?
I
You know,
doubt
like,
it.
and that's the thing, right? Like they came up together. Now it's supposed to be the whole thing is winning together. Well, how does that change now between the two of them? Do they want to win together, or are they now both kind of like, you know what? Maybe this isn't it. Maybe we should just see what else is out there.
It
I
hasn't worked to this point, right?
it
Like I
hasn't.
know that they've gone to the wild card a couple of times, but they've bowed out in disastrous fashion.
Well,
And so, you know, that concept of winning together, if it hasn't come to fruition yet, you know, I'm not
yeah,
saying they don't want to win together. I'm not
yeah.
speculating at all how they feel. I'm just saying they might be looking at it like this didn't work. It might be time for us to move on.
Well,
Yeah, I mean, to what Jeff said, I can relate. Nobody's paying me $300 million. I promise you.
Hmm.
Jeff, you see my comedy, you can attest.
$30. $30.
That's about right when you're first starting out in stand-up. But
Yep.
I would liken it to being a new comedian. So you're all doing open mics, nobody's getting paid, you're all buddies, and then all your friends. I was lucky, I started out with a group of comics who are now very successful. And so you branch off. You're then now you're making money, and the money, you know, every 6 months to a year, it goes up, and you're making, and then you're focused on you. You're not like, hey, I want to take an 80% pay cut so I can work with my friends every weekend.
Yeah.
It's not exactly the same thing, but I think at this point in their, yeah, they were babies. They were in the minor leagues. And now I'm focused on me. They're gonna start families, etc.
One thing with the team building here as well, I don't this past off season, I don't blame Atkins as much as a lot of people do because honestly, if you one thing he's not the greatest at is signing people, but there wasn't really a lot of bats out there to sign, and I'm not sure what was available in the trade market. So I kind of give him a bit of an albatross for this past offseason to not improve the offense because he had like George Soler and JD Martinez and guys like that, but there was really no impact guy except for Cody Bellinger who got hurt again. Um, but this offseason, there's more. There's more choice. That's why I was mentioning Anthony Santander as an example, because obviously Baltimore, their ridiculous wealth of outfielders they have right now, he's probably going to be gone because of his age, or Cedric Mullins, right? Guys like that. I think you're going to see a few more guys available that can actually help the team. So that's why I'll give him this last offseason to see if he can get people here that can help the team because it wasn't there last year. The redoubling down in Kevin Kiermaier was a really dumb idea. But the IKF signing was a great signing, you know, until he was one of the best players we had until we traded him. So I think the roster construction next year is going to be the key. Like, do they bring in a proven guy or two proven bats? And like you said, Pat, a couple of pitchers as well to kind of show Vladdy and Bo, like, look, we got these guys. Last year we couldn't get them, and now we got these guys. And maybe I think that's going to be the biggest thing. Like Jen, you were talking about, you want to see how the roster construction goes before if or when or if they don't sign anything. I think that's what it's going to be. They want to see what they have to work with next year. And if it's not there at the beginning of the season, I guarantee they're one step out the door already.
Well, I'm with you that there weren't, there were no, aside from Juan Soto. No, that's not. But that was via trade though, so I digress. But yeah, free agents, and if you were, I agree with you, and just to add to that very quickly, look at how things worked out with all of those, Jorge Soler, a number of others that I can't really think of right now. The vast majority of those free agent quote unquote sluggers, the vast majority did not pan out. They're having terrible. I mean, the whole
and they signed late too. They weren't getting offers anyway. And now
Exactly.
Soler's back with the Braves.
Looking
Weird
forward
place to go.
Looking forward to next year. A player that is potentially on the roster bubble has been incredibly hot. Alejandro Kirk is hitting 400 over his last 10 games. And if this team is to compete in 2025, like they have suggested they're going to try and do, what do we need to see from him the rest of the way? And does he fit on this roster next year, or would we prefer an upgrade behind the dish? I'll throw to you, Jen.
I would prefer an upgrade. I think I don't want Kirk taking on the bulk of the workload personally. I don't know how, I know he's young, but I don't know how his knees will hold up. So I would prefer someone else with a bit more experience to be doing the bulk of the workload. And I think that is how you keep Kirk healthy and hopefully hitting well. I mean, we know my very strong opinions on the catching situation in this team in the first place, right? The fact that Kirk is the one remaining absolutely blows me away. And that is not an anti-Kirk statement. It just blows me away that this is the position they have found themselves in. So, it's great that he's gone on this little tear. But any player can get hot, right? That doesn't necessarily signal anything. It's a 10 game hot streak. Does that mean anything in the grand scheme of things? Probably not. So I would like for them to sign another catcher who is going to be, more the Danny Jansen, more of the everyday guy who hopefully will not get hit on the hand all the time.
What about Danny Jansen?
I would say that 2 years ago, probably to the day, I said on this very podcast, when Kirk was an all-star, they should trade him.
I said the same thing.
Me too.
Yep.
His value is at its highest.
Yep.
And so I'm 100% with you, Jen. At most, I'd like to see him catch 80 games a season. And you can't be bringing in someone like Brian Serven, not to dump on him, but just as an example, it can't be a guy who's going to hit 175 to 200. Like you have to, it's not going to be league minimum. You need to spend, I don't know what it is, $2 to $4 million. Get someone, like you said, with experience.
Danny Jansen.
Well, yeah, but I mean, how much is that going to cost, right?
Well,
and
Danny Jansen, honestly, his hitting's up. He's hitting like a storm with Boston right now. But I mean, overall, yeah. But he's been very hot and cold like he usually is. Yes. But I mean, if you're looking at free agents next year, like why wouldn't you go for the guy who knows your team? That's my first thing right there. Is like they were talking on the broadcast today. Like Caleb Joseph's mentioning how some of the pitchers that Alejandro Kirk is working with that he hasn't worked with before, he doesn't know where to set up properly for them because he's never worked with them before. So if you bring in a whole new like veteran catcher, like just say, not this guy, like a Wilson Contreras, for example, because he can hit and he can catch, but it's a whole new learning game. Like I would go for Jansen right away. I don't see any reason why you wouldn't. And I hope he would want to come back here, because he's got so much ties to maybe he's the adventurous type, wants to go somewhere else. I don't know, but that's the first guy I would go for. And then if he doesn't want it, then you find your veteran catcher who there's a billion of them who will hit you at 210 and get you 10 homers and can catch 100 games. But yeah, Alejandro Kirk, I wouldn't give him 80 games. I'd give Alejandro 50. I don't know, unless he gets in better shape. And I don't want to, I don't want to be this fat shaming guy about Alejandro Kirk. He has to get in better shape. He just has to, because his career will be done by the time he's 30 if he keeps up this way. He just will.
I'm with you. And like when I played, obviously not in the majors or anywhere remotely close, but I'm not a large guy. I relied on speed. And so you have to think, like, if he hits the ball on the ground, it's a guaranteed out.
Yep.
Basically.
Oh, easy.
But an average runner, like he's in like the 98th percentile in base running. I believe
He was
that's accurate.
5th slowest last year. He is now 8th slowest. So he's actually gained 3 spots.
His
About the
total
slowest
buck
guy.
Or
got
3
signed by
people
the-
have lost speed.
Yeah.
Exactly. Exactly.
Exactly.
I will say this. I follow the catching a lot more closely because that's the position I played. And then not just the Blue Jays or the Mariners, but the MLB as a whole.
You had a good
I
one, though, my
remember
God.
looking back at that year where you guys had Kirk, Moreno, and Jansen. And I remember telling Scott that you guys have to trade Kirk. You have to trade Kirk. Like, this is the dude to trade. He is an all-star. He doesn't project long term.
Oh,
Have the next Yadier Molina coming up, in my opinion.
No, he's
And so for them to miss that opportunity and for him to be the last man standing out of the 3 of them is an absolute catastrophe.
it goes
But
with their defense first thing because he's a defense first catcher now. He's a good
even
defensive
then, Guerrero
catcher.
Moreno's better than him. defense.
And yeah,
For sure is.
But
There's
it
no
speaks-
debate on that.
It speaks to roster mismanagement,
yeah,
Yeah.
right?
exactly.
Whether they evaluated what they had incorrectly or just, I don't know. Or they just kind of didn't make the move and then painted themselves into a corner because, Jansen's contract was expiring and so on and so forth. But definitely it speaks to some sort of roster mismanagement that Kirk is the last man standing.
And bad trading. I
wonder-
mean, if you do Moreno and you trade him to Arizona, they had the problem with Arizona that year was they had all left-handed outfielders. They had like 5 left-handed outfielders, and that's part of the reason we sent Lourdes Gurriel in the first place. They needed a righty, but of all those 5, like I love Varsho's defense, but couldn't they have picked one of the other ones? They were all kind of in the same spot, so they basically, when it comes to their scouting, maybe their scouting needs to be better because they picked. I love Varsho's defense, but that's it. They could have picked a better one that had maybe a little less defense, but a lot more offense. And that goes on the scouting staff to me.
I don't know either what the major issue is. I think, and Jen, I'm with you, roster mismanagement. My best guess, I suppose, would be they kept Kirk over both Moreno and Jansen because, team
Nobody
control,
wanted him?
I'm sure, is a
No,
big
nobody
thing.
wanted him.
They're not, well, nobody wanted them this year.
Nobody wanted him last year. Nobody wanted him the year before. Nobody
2
really
years-
wanted him in 2021. No,
2
like
years
when he
ago,
had that,
no,
when he had
was
that good
an
year,
all-star.
some
He
people
was an
wanted
all-star.
him,
And I think, too,
but you
like,
wouldn't get the return that they would have expected. That's the thing. Like people, I think all baseball
I
people
agree with
understood.
that.
I would agree with that too, but then that just means that the entire league is valuing Kirk correctly, and
Yeah.
your front office fucking isn't.
Exactly.
Like, it's bad. It's a bad job. They mess it up. And regardless of the media raking them over the coals and saying, "Oh wow, they traded an all-star away for pennies or pebbles or whatever they want to use," that's fine because at the end of the day, your team's still going to be better off because of it. And I understand that, when it comes to offense, and that is the major issue with the Blue Jays right now, catcher is not going to make or break your team offensively, regardless of who it is. Even as a Mariners fan, with Cal Raleigh hitting, 25 home runs and on pace to hit like 115 RBIs, it still is not going to make or break your offense. It's just not an offensive position.
No.
And so for them to go and butcher it so badly and lose, the best defensive catcher, lose the youngest catcher, and to lose the fan favorite catcher between Jansen and Moreno is catastrophic. And the catcher is such an important position when it comes to managing your pitching rotation and bullpen, right? That goes so overlooked and underrated in developing with these pitchers. And the Mariners are a perfect example, right? 4 out of their 5 starters are homegrown, and their catcher is also homegrown and came up with those 4 starters. And now you're seeing it. They're the best starting rotation in the league.
Well,
And the Jays had that opportunity with Moreno, and they blew it.
Well, you're mentioning that this goes back to even more than Atkins and Shapiro. This goes back to John Farrell. This goes back to your scouts. This goes back to your guys who are training guys. Like you got 4 homegrown pitchers. We have 3 of them that would have been great. And where are they? They're all injured right now. All of them. Like all the guys we've picked get injured. I'm hoping they'll be great in 2 or 3 years, but they said they were going to restock the farm system. They didn't.
No, never happened.
I mean, injuries has played a bit of a factor with the pitching because I know they were trying to get more pitching, but when was the last time we produced like a decent outfielder?
And
Seriously.
that's why they leaned very heavily this draft into position players.
Yeah.
Like it was, I don't know if it was every pick, but it was the
They
vast.
got a lot of good arms in the A ball, like going out like on the Canadians and down in Florida as well. They got a lot of good guys coming up, like with great potential. I think they were too busy trying to draft the best athlete, which always ends up being a middle infielder. That's why we have so many second baseman, shortstop types. I mean, that's great, and you can maybe make them do another position if you want to, but that just goes back to the fact they just want athletes to play many positions, and I think that's the biggest thing that they've done wrong this whole time is not giving guys set positions. And I will die by this one because I just think it really screws with the player. Just like you said, Pat, if you have an IKF on the bench, you have guys on there who can play all the outfield positions, all the infield positions. That's awesome. But you know what? I want a third baseman. I want a second baseman. Look how the Braves are built, or look how the Phillies are built. Any of these teams that have won, or Houston, they have guys playing their positions and then a guy to back them up. And we don't have that. We have too many middling, average to slightly above average fielders who can play everywhere, but they're not the best at any place, which weirdly goes against their whole defense first aspect in the first place. That's the other thing I don't get. You talk about pitching and defense, but then you get a bunch of guys playing a bunch of different positions that aren't their own. That's not good defense to me.
Well, and again, it goes back to not knowing how to build a roster,
Yep.
right?
Jack of all
Proper
trades,
roster
master of
construction.
none.
Well, you can build your roster internally if you give these guys a position, maybe like again Seattle with with Cal Raleigh and with Kirby and all the guys in the pitching staff and the guys in the Braves, they had positions coming up. We don't have any of that. So it's counterintuitive to what you want to do with your team. And that isn't just the roster construction. That's an organizational thing because that's how they're training all these guys to do it with their fancy schmancy thing down in Dunedin. They're getting a new pitching thing put in this year, apparently, and all this other fancy stuff to use. Well, maybe you should learn how to use it. Like, is there a disconnect between the draft guys and the guys who develop the players? Like, here's the player you're getting. This is what he's good at. Make sure you focus on that. And then they get them to go, well, maybe we can make him good at this too. And that, I think, is a bit of a disconnect between your drafting and your development. And that's now showing. Like, I love the bats like the bats coming up aren't bad. I mean, our Buffalo guys are hitting all right, but no one's a superstar. So Horowitz is going to be the best we got out of that lot. Maybe Leo Jimenez. I think he actually has possibility to be pretty good as well. But other than that, position wise, there isn't much. And when you're drafting position players for 7 years and that's all you get, you're just putting your organization behind. That's why they're 23rd or 20th in organizational rankings. It's just it's not just a team anymore. It's an organizational thing. And that's why after 2025, when they blow it up again, Shapiro and Atkins will be gone. And hopefully Ed hires somebody else to run the team. I also wonder how much James Click has involved. I think overall, when it came to the trades, I guarantee James Click had his hands all over a bunch of that stuff. I thought maybe he might have been brought in and they would have kicked Atkins out.
I think what you're saying, a disconnect between the scouts and the development people, that's possible. Because again, like none of us knows, and so incredibly tight-lipped, more so than any, sports team that I've paid attention to. And at this point, it's like, okay, like what are you guys actually up to? But you'll never hear. It's all platitudes and nothing more. No real meat and potatoes. Exactly. Thank you. I really think I'm guessing it's from the top down. They're all of those people, the scouts, player development, etc. They're all being told what to do by the 2 or 3 guys in charge. And these guys want to keep their jobs, so they do it. And now we see the fruit that's bearing. Which is
my correction, Shane Farrell, not John Farrell. I meant Shane Farrell, his kid.
Both. you know?
Maybe it's an internal thing. He's trying to destroy the Jays from the inside because he's really a Boston Red Sox guy. I don't know.
All right, going to the grounds crew, I wanted to read out a couple of chat notes. Jeremy Pritham says the Jays need to get Cal Raleigh. No. The Sebi says Espinal was also an all-star. If I remember correctly, Toronto traded him to the Cincinnati Reds for a left-handed fungo and a bucket of curveballs, if I'm not mistaken.
And he's
Jen,
doing
do you
nothing.
think that the front office truly missed a golden opportunity with Kirk and Espinal being all-stars that year and not capitalizing on that value?
I don't know what value they would have gotten back for Kirk, right? Like they weren't getting Varsho back for Kirk. Okay. So we'll acknowledge that up front.
Absolutely.
But I think by not trading him, they were then sort of forced to trade other catchers. That's the problem.
Yes. 100%, 100% with you.
Yeah.
We, like we mentioned earlier, you and I both said it on this very podcast. And of course, scouts and GMs know a hell of a lot more than us. And I'm probably with you in, are they getting Varsho? I'd be on the fence there, you know, with Gurriel, of course, as the trade went with Moreno. But as Jeff mentioned, you know, they had 5 left-handed outfielders. They wanted to switch it up. To Jeff's point earlier, could another one have been acquired to fill a need? And then you're keeping Moreno. I don't know, essentially.
Well, no, it's more like I think they mismanaged which outfielder they should have taken. I think like it would have Moreno would have still gone there, but we should have gotten a better outfielder for it. What I would have done, I would have traded Kirk for a bag of balls and just kept Jansen and Moreno. Like, who says you have to get value every single time you trade a player? Sometimes the value comes from just getting rid of the player, and I think that's
And
probably
opening a
what we should have
roster
done.
spot.
Exactly, exactly. And he's gone. Moreno comes up, and then Jansen's going to eventually get traded, probably because of his status where his contract was, and then Moreno takes #1 spot. I mean, that's the way it should have been. And yeah, they bumbled. Well, I'm not going to say the full word, but they bumbled their way through the entire thing. And Jen, you're right. They mismanaged this worse than you could possibly imagine. Literally the worst case scenario.
All right, this is Long Toss episode 311. I'm Juan. I'm filling in for Scott this week. We're up to about 48 watching currently. Going to the chat, Addie's Life says, Jen looks so pretty. Addie, this is a baseball podcast. Don't be so fucking weird. I will publicly shame you. Absolutely.
Where are the compliments for the rest of us? Like I said, I showered.
And those are the old men she's talking to. It's a pretty girl and the old men.
No problem calling
you
it
for that, though.
Yeah, brutal. Looking forward to next year. There are a couple kids that have come up, a couple kids that have shown some good things. Out of Clement, Schneider, Horowitz, and if there's anybody else that you'd like to discuss that isn't listed here by Scott, do any of these people or any of these players look like everyday players next year on this roster? Let me throw to you, Pat.
I've already talked about him. Spencer Horwitz. Like defensively, Jeff mentioned earlier, and I'm with you. Second base is, to me, seemingly where he would be. How long-term that is, I don't know. He did struggle fairly recently, but it seems as though over the past number of days, he's picked it back up. I don't have any stats in front of me. I think he's probably hitting about 260 to 270 now, maybe higher.
He's hitting 273. And the funny thing, because I actually had this up here, here's the funny thing, because I pulled up the rookie stats. And if you talk about people with the most at bats, Spencer Horwitz leads in batting average as well over anybody in the American League right now when it comes to
there you go. And that's why I mentioned, and you know, we talked about this earlier. Will he have enough plate appearances or games to be a legit contender for Rookie of the Year? I would say no. It's possible. He'll probably end up with 90, 95 games if he's every day, which he is thus far.
Yeah, he's at 54 right now. He's at 54 games.
They've got about 50 left. He might hit 100 if he stays healthy. Yeah, I mean, Horwitz, what's his on base? Probably
on base. He was leading at 369. He's now at 364, but he was at one point leading. Let me just pull this up and see if I can figure this out here.
Yeah, so I mean, your second baseman, you don't need him to be
Yep.
hitting. He doesn't need to be Marcus Semien. He doesn't need to be hitting 30 to 40 home runs. But if the defense is decent and he's hitting, 250, getting on base at a 340 clip, I'm with it. But like Davis Schneider, I really feel as though pitchers figured him out. He's hitting just above 200 or thereabouts now after today's game. I hope he bounces back. I really like the guy, and I like his story from last season. And if I recall correctly, he was a guest on the Walkoff podcast, so that gives him points in my book as well.
Yeah.
Ernie Clement, he played shortstop today, I believe. He can play third. You could probably slot him in at second. And as we mentioned earlier, that's your bench guy. That's your 26th man. That's your versatile guy that you can plug in where you need to. I hope I'm wrong. I hope they all turn into Babe Ruth. But realistically, just from the eye test, which is, I suppose, what I would go by, I don't foresee him being a long-term solution, especially at a place like third base, which is a huge need for this team in my beliefs.
He's also 28. Like, he's up there too. He's played for a while. He even played with the Oakland A's for a while.
Horowitz is older. I think he's 27.
He is.
Do you guys think it's, and I'll toss to you, Jen, do you think it's an organizational failure to develop all these, quote unquote, super utility players that, I know Schneider has played in left field, right field, second base, third base. They're moving Horowitz around because Vladdy's at first and third base. Is it an organizational failure? And I know that we have touched on it, to not let these guys develop as full-time second baseman or third or whatever the position may be, and instead of trying to create all this flexibility, and they're now hampering their development.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I mean, how much flexibility does one team need? Right? You need one or two guys who can move around and basically be your, Isaiah Kiner Falefa type, right? Where you, in a pinch, you can put him here, there, or wherever, and you're going to get, decent enough, if not solid defense out of him. And you're okay there, right? But to have so many guys like that who never really get to settle into one position and learn that position exceptionally well, right? If you want to be focusing on defense, then that's where it has to start, right? Not getting guys who are defense first guys and can't hit worth a lick. Maybe if you develop their defense and they're only sort of focusing on learning one position well, they can then also be focusing on making adjustments at the plate, right? Versus, well, I got to make sure I'm ready to be put in anywhere where they pencil me in today, and maybe I don't get played. And I just feel like that creates a lot of confusion and doesn't lead to good long-term development. And I think that's why some of these guys are in their late 20s and only just now getting their cup of coffee at the major league level.
They've also
Absolutely.
been blocked
It's not little league where it's like, okay, Jeffy, you're in right field this inning and you're pitching in the second, and then you're at third base in the third. No, I think you hit the nail on the head, Jen, where it's like, you jack of all trades, master of none. Like, LeBron James is very good at basketball. He's not also, Mookie Betts is the exception. That guy is amazing at everything. I'm sure he could master quantum physics next weekend if he wanted to. But like, I don't want my doctor to also be my mechanic, right? Like Josh Donaldson didn't play center field. Jose Bautista wasn't our starting catcher. So 100% with you on what you said. It's frustrating to no end.
Well, I think part of the issue is we're blocked in a couple of spots. Like Springer blocks right field, so you can't have a guy like Barge and maybe come over and take that spot. I'm glad why I was glad they got rid of Chapman, because it opened up third to maybe one of these guys taking. I thought Damiano Parmigiani, I thought he was going to be the guy possibly this year, but I think we had some third baseman like Arelvitz was considered for there as well. And then stuff happened. But then what about the new guy like Joey? What's this? How do you pronounce his name? Lopafito, the new guy we got from Houston.
Lopafito, yeah.
Right. So he's struck out half the at bats so far since he's been here. He's got good pedigree, I guess. Say he might be all right, but he's another one who's just almost. It seems to be maybe good enough we have a lot of maybe good enough guys, right? Then they're all kind of in that same. It's like a soup of the same people. Like you could put Horowitz, or Schneider, Barger, all these guys into one bowl, and they'd be kind of the same player coming out the way the Jays have created them, right?
Well, and maybe good enough guys are not good enough to contend next year.
Exactly. So I
Right,
think that's why I
so-
think you take the one guy. That's why
Yeah.
Spencer makes it.
Yeah.
And the guy we got from Houston, maybe, but he's definitely not a guarantee. I think next year Springer should be a DH, strictly DH, because
I
he's
would
a great
disagree.
fielder, but I just don't think he can. I don't think his body can take it. He's one of those fragile athletes I've ever seen in my life. He's just
He is
so
getting
fragile.
older, but he has been, even when he was hitting like
Nothing?
absolute trash earlier in the season, he has been very surprisingly, because I'm with you, like that guy could have starred in the movie Glass, like,
Yeah.
but
No, he's a
has
great
been
fielder. He's a great fielder.
surprisingly good. But if
But-
he's hitting anywhere close to how he's gone overall this year, I mean, you can't trade him unless
That's
you
the
want to
thing.
eat
And
at
he
least
can't be your
20
DH.
million bucks. Yeah. But like DH, like you want someone who's producing, right?
I
At the
just-
plate.
I personally think this is again my opinion. I just think he would. I think as a DH, I think he's gonna be better. The outfield takes its toll on his body. Like I said, he's great at it. Like that run he made to try and make that catch today, he dove for adjustments. Like it just goes to show he's still got range and stuff like that. But you get the trade off, right? Like is that hampering his hitting? Because the big thing for me is his hitting now. Like his defense isn't the issue. The hitting, and that's why I thought DH he could focus on the one thing, because I think he's going to be once his contract's done. I don't think he gets another contract. I think personally, this little hitting that he's done the last month or so has been great. But my first 2.5 months, he was atrocious. Like really, Matt Chapman atrocious. So what do you do with him for 2 years? Like that's the thing. Like, do you eat his entire contract and trade him to a contender? Like, what do you do with the guy? Like it's just taking up a spot in the outfield that could be used for somebody who can actually hit.
Yeah, I think when it comes to Springer, I mean that's dead money at this point. You have to accept the
is.
fact that you're eating that entire contract, whether he's on your roster or not. I think best case scenario, and I think because he's been in the league a long time, and as far as I know, minus the garbage can scandal, he's been a pretty positive member of the clubhouse. I
Oh,
think right now he's got to transition into that almost Mark DeRosa role that you guys had in Toronto with.
Hmm.
Of, this is a bench player. He's probably our fourth, probably fifth outfielder, and he's really just here to help the kids along. He's here to be a leader. He's here to keep everybody focused throughout the long season, and hopefully he helps the younger kids develop. I think that's best case scenario when it comes to George Springer at this point. It's not a knock to say he hasn't had a great career. It's not a knock to say he can't still contribute a little bit. His
Nope.
defense is not all that bad. I would be surprised if he was a negative defensive player. I could be wrong.
No, I think he's positive. Like his defense is great. Don't in right field. Now that he's in right, great defense. Like I don't question that. It's just his bat has been just not non-existent, but really not the greatest for the last year or two now. It's just
He's not catching up to the fastball, and I don't think
Exactly.
pulling him out of the field is going to fix that. So
Yeah.
I'd be inclined to, until he proves he isn't good defensively anymore, I'd be inclined to leave him out in the field.
because that gives us two guys in the outfield now who are all defense, no hit. That's my issue. Like that's the thing.
Exactly.
So do we trade Varsho? Like that's the thing. We can't have two positions out there that can't hit. That just we
I
can't.
looked it up on Baseball Reference. Surprisingly to me, he is a negative 0.4 defense
Really?
score.
Hmm.
I am surprised, but I was going by the eye test.
Yeah.
But he is positive offensive. So I mean, WAR, what is it good for? Absolutely nothing.
What's he at, a 1?
Apparently. But sorry.
What's he at, a 1 for his WAR right now?
Overall, he would be 0.9. So basically, yeah, a 1. I would agree 100% with Jen, where he could not catch up to the fastball for months. I would say over the past number of weeks, he has looked better and has been more productive. But like I said about Chapman last year, it's about the whole season. So yeah, if he ends, if there's a 6-week, 7-week stretch here where he's hitting very well, which he has been recently.
Mhm.
But if at the end of the season he's hitting 230, it doesn't matter what he did in August.
Well, it's like Kirk. He's kind of on that same, like they both sucked for a couple months when it came to hitting, and then he started hitting better and better and better as they've gone forward. It's like if you could just eliminate April and May and keep the offense they've had the last little while, this team wouldn't be where they are right now. I think it's part of the reason we are where we are is because guys were underperforming the first 2 months. And that's the big, I think like at least 5 guys not hitting the way they should or they were expected to. And that's again goes back to roster management, knowing your players very well, that kind of stuff. He's a slow starter. Alejandro Kirk's a slow starter. Like we can't have ever being a slow starter picking up their offense in June. We need some guys who can hit in April and May.
Well, Kirk's a slow everything, but I agree with you.
Long Toss episode 311. We're just over 45 viewers. Tuesdays with Johnny says WAR is a horribly flawed statistic. I'm eager for the development of its replacement. That's very interesting, and I would love to see some more development and some more accurate ways. I want to move on to the next topic because I think it's going to be a long one.
I apologize for interrupting. Has anybody commented on my appearance in a positive way?
I got to be honest with you, Pat. Nobody has called you handsome, and I think it's pretty freaking rude.
I appreciate that, and right back at you.
All right,
I haven't it at all for me, so I'm
Jeff and I myself haven't got any compliments either, which is a bit weird.
I feel like you're lying to placate me, but I'll take it where I can get.
They're just not beard people. That's the problem.
Moving into the next topic, I feel like this podcast is about 25% a Mark Shapiro hate podcast. At this
Shapiro,
point,
man, Shapiro.
See, here we go. It's because I spent too much time in the States. I think that's the issue. I'm pronouncing
no,
things
because Shapiro
wrong.
is a stupid way to say the name. I don't know anything. Shapiro.
He did a presser. I didn't watch it. I'm not familiar. So I'll toss it to you guys here in a second, and I'll kind of go back and forth with y'all as I get to hear the contents of said presser. Let's start with you, Jen. How did you feel? What were your thoughts on Mark Shapiro's latest presser?
There's a lot of arrogance every time he speaks, I find, and he speaks well. And, he definitely walks the line between saying something and saying nothing. He's excellent at that. And I've actually maintained up until this point that I actually quite like him, or at least he comes across well. Okay. And for people who think that I have this, I hate the team, I hate the front office, and that I have this narrative, I supported this front office for probably 6-7 seasons. It's only the last couple of seasons that my opinion has changed based on what I've seen, based on what they've done, based on the results, based on what they've said, right? This is not some long-held narrative of mine, that no matter what they do, I'm going to just rag on them. For him to say that there was this great big disconnect between what they thought they had built and the results on the field, I'm not quite sure how there could have been such a big disconnect, right? Because I think a lot of fans felt that they hadn't filled in the holes well enough. I think a lot of fans could see, not that I think we expected them to be 10 games under 500. I'm not sure that anybody quite expected it to be as atrocious as it was. And, but I think we all could have said, maybe you want to get a pitcher because maybe Manoah, we really need to hedge our bets with this one, right? And just things of that nature. And so for him to now be talking that there was this great big disconnect in what they thought this team would be, I don't understand how there was that big of a disconnect. And for that alone, this is why I think now both of them have just got to go. But it's clear that that's not what's going to happen, right? Really the time to fire Atkins was at the end of last season. That end of season press conference last year was utter disaster, in my opinion. Mm-hmm. They let him stay. They let him do the offseason. We now see the results. They let him do the trade deadline. It is very, very clear that these two gentlemen are going to be at the helm. Like I said, one final ride, and I don't know. I don't know where they go from here. I don't know how they make this work in 2025. There's two paths to the playoffs. One is to win the division, and the other is to earn a wild card spot. Okay. So you look at the teams that are in their division, both the New York Yankees and the Baltimore Orioles, as we talk today, are 21 games above 500. 21 games above 500. The Blue Jays are 10 games below, and they were before the sell-off, right? That's not the result of the sell-off. That's where they've been, for a while now. So, no matter what, like, not only does this front office have to address their needs, they have to do it like perfectly, right? In order to like get into 500 or above baseball. But the Yankees and the Orioles aren't taking a step backwards, probably not. They may not be 21 games above 500, but they're not going to be 2 games above 500 at this point next season. So there's one of them is your division winner, and one of them is wild card spot number 1. Right?
Absolutely. Because you think about the Yankees, Garrett Cole was injured for the first number of months of the season. And the Yankees, as you said, are still 21 games. What if he was healthy and in good form to start the year? Like,
he hasn't been very good anyway this year. He hasn't been the best. Like, he's
well,
been
exactly.
okay.
But he's a Cy Young winner.
Yeah.
And
Nestor
off of
Cortez
Cy
hasn't
Young-
been pitching well either for the last few games. All their starters haven't had like the greatest seasons, but they managed to make it work.
No, Yankees fans are mad all the time.
Oh yeah.
But that's just Yankees fans. But still, I'm just saying, right? Like they, things haven't gone perfectly for them, and they're 21 games above 500, right? Even Boston, who everybody wrote off coming into the season, they're not nearly as bad as people thought they would be. They've somehow managed to be 6 games above 500. I think they're just out of a wild card spot right now. There's so many teams that are ahead of the Blue Jays that the Blue Jays would have to gain ground on in order to have a sniff at success in 2025, right?
Mhm.
And nothing I've heard from these two, nothing that I've seen them do suggests that they can do it.
No, the problem they're going to have now is they're not. You could build a team next year, I think, with what's available to contend. Their problem is that once you get below that 26 man, they don't have backups in the pitching department, for example. That's the biggest thing. Like last year, pitching staff was as good as it could be. I don't think any of us really thought it was going to be as bad as it was going to be this year, especially with the bullpen and all the injuries and stuff like that. So I think that's part of what's happened with us. But there's nothing in the farm system to back up to replace anybody. Like, I mean, I'm looking at the guys who are pitching, like Ryan Burr and Tommy Nance and like a bunch of guys I've never freaking heard of. Like, we don't have guys coming up to replace them. So once there's an injury, they're screwed. That's what happened this year. Once there was an injury to start the starting pitching, they were done. And then once they started getting 2 in the bullpen, they were done. So when Shapiro we talk about that disconnect, it goes back to what I said about I think there's a lot of disconnects within the organization in general. I think there's too many people doing things in the organization in general. I just think they want this whole collaborative idea of running a baseball team. I don't think you can run it as a big collaboration of 150 freaking people, from the analytics guys to the guys who are helping out with their motion to whatever's going on in the background. I mean, they've got how many people in the hitting coaches alone? Like 3 or 4 of them?
Yeah.
Like it's
And
just,
the players also have many have their own personal hitting coach.
Exactly.
But imagine you're a kid, you're 4 years old, and you're being taught, this is how you spell apple. And then someone else is giving you different information. You're confused. So yeah, like it's just.
And that's what I was saying before about Like the Yankees have depth. The Braves have depth. All these teams that can bring people, they have depth behind what they've got. We don't at all. And that
Well,
is the biggest disconnect that there could possibly be, is not have nobody to back up your guys and up at the top.
and that's been their failure the entire time, because
Yep.
their one mandate was to rebuild the farm system and to have a line of talent, right? That can
Exactly.
just move through the system and replace guys as they leave. And they were not successful at doing that for whatever reason.
Yeah,
Well,
like
to
And
be fair,
look at the
Jen,
Dodgers.
they-
The Dodgers have like an entire like starting rotation on the injured list right now.
Mhm.
The Houston Astros have a wicked starting rotation on the injured list right now, but they still got guys to do it. They still got guys
Looking-
coming.
So Jen, to your point, like, yes, they did say that they did want to build the farm system to kind of have like an assembly line, so to speak. Guys get too expensive. Yes, they did say that, but to be fair, they only had a decade to do it. So cut them a little slack, please. It's
Yeah.
This is true.
embarrassing as
So
hell.
yes, to be fair, they should be offered contract extensions to really be given that runway.
Just another 10, 20 years, I'm sure they'll figure it out.
On that point, I do want to toss it over to the chat. Mark Drebert said the press conference proved they have no plan, no direction, and there will be no accountability. Atkins coming back trying to compete in 2025 will set the team back another 3 to 5 years.
Yep.
I actually have to agree with this comment. I have been surprised and shocked at how adamant they are about competing in 2025. The pieces aren't there. The players are aging. You haven't done the right moves and pieces to be competitive in 2025. Pat, did you get a chance to watch Mark Shapiro's presser?
I didn't. And even if I did have the chance, I would not have, because I brought something up on my phone. I'll show on camera here in a moment. So I used to live, as mentioned, downtown Toronto, and working a day job in finance while also doing comedy. And I was walking home from work one day, and I lived right near the Skydome, and I refuse to call it anything else, like just kitty corner from the Skydome in a condo. And I'm walking, and a familiar face walks out of one of the doors, and it's Mark Shapiro, and he's picking up his like food delivery, like Uber Eats or something. So I'm like, hey, you're Mark Shapiro. And he was like, thank you for not saying Shapiro. Because he made up that pronunciation. Like, it's BS. I don't know what his issue is, but whatever. So I stop and I talk to him, and I get a picture with him. So here it is. You can see that right there. And he was being friendly, but it was clear like he wanted to go. But I love baseball, so I'm asking questions and stuff and holding him up. And I only became cognizant of this after the fact. And I was like, I told my girlfriend at the time, I was like, oh, I just met the Blue Jays GM. She's like, oh, that's cool, Mark Shapiro. And I was like, don't you dare. He doesn't like that. Well, it turns out it was the day of the trade deadline. I was holding, so maybe it's my fault. I messed up.
Damn.
But no, I didn't watch it. But
All your fault.
Exactly.
Hey,
I'm so sick of the nothingness. Like, it's just like when John Schneider was like, well, you just got to tip your cap. No, you don't. Like, yeah, you can, but then do the work to get better and fill the holes that you have and figure things out. And it just seems like these guys are kind of coasting. And so, no, I did not see it. Yes, I am frustrated. I really hope th're both gone beginning of next season. I'm not confident that will take place.
No.
And I will make this commitment to Walkoff Nation. I will intentionally continue to call him Shapiro until he trades Vladimir Guerrero to the Mariners.
Oh, no.
Jeff, did you have a chance to watch it?
I watched a bit of it before we came on.
Was
just
there
trying.
anything in there to give you any sort of hope? And was there any positive takeaway, anything that made you feel good or happy about what was said?
I'm with Jen that I haven't hated Shapiro as much as I've kind of not like Atkins. I think he's done what he came here to do,
Mhm.
and that's to redo the organization in terms of turning the Skydome into an actual baseball facility, getting the facility down in Dunedin, doing all those things, helping with Solon Field when they needed it. Like, A friend of mine actually was one of the head engineers for the Sky Dome, and he now goes around the stadiums all over the world just fixing stuff for them. And he likes Shapiro. He always said that he was an easy guy to talk to, and he seemed to be focused on what he needed to do. Like he said this whole conference, he's like, "Oh, we got a new scoreboard coming. We haven't mentioned that yet." And I kept thinking, why? Like he's done what he needs to do now. Their scoreboard, they just redid the whole bloody thing. It looks pretty good. The whole experience of the baseball game has changed. It's more family friendly now than it was.
The music is too loud, I will say. I brought my
It
son,
is
who was
ridiculously
almost
loud.
7, to a game back in May, and he was just like that.
It's too loud, and they're trying to fill every second of
Yes.
non-play,
With
and there's
something.
nothing organic about it. That would
Yeah.
be my
100%.
complaint about that. But Shapiro, as a baseball ops guy, has
Mixed.
absolutely done the job that he was brought here to do. The reason why I tweeted the other day with that press conference that it's clear to me that they both need to be fired is because Atkins isn't going to go unless Shapiro does. And
Yep.
that became crystal clear.
Do you think?
Absolutely. And the
I'm not
thing
sure
is,
about that.
you're focused on stadium improvements, which, okay, fine. Yeah, it's, as far as Major League Baseball stadiums go, it's surprisingly now one of the older ones. I don't know where it would rank, but that's
It's
like if
way up there.
if
Like 5 or 6.
yeah, so if I hired somebody and I'm having trouble, they're like, "Oh, we remodeled your house." It's like, yeah, but we're all dying of cancer. Like, can't you focus on the biggest need? Because if the Jays are winning 105 games, nobody cares if it's the dumpiest stadium in baseball, especially in Toronto. You will sell out every single game.
Yeah,
Yes,
we are.
you renovated, but that cannot be the primary focus.
No, but I think one thing that did was bring younger fans in. Like I took my niece there last year. She'd never been to a baseball game before, and she sat down. As soon as she sat down, the Jays scored like 5 runs in the first inning. It was one of those games, and by like the 5th, she's like, "Can we do something else?" God, like she's bored, right? So
Sure.
all
My
the other
son,
stuff that's
same
there,
thing in May. Yeah.
and I think that's they've accomplished what they wanted to do, was to have a little bit more variations, to be a lot more inclusive of like the food, especially food wise. They've done an amazing job in there as well. One weird thing is having
I
like
still bring my own food.
I do too, because it's too expensive.
I'm cheap.
But the other weird thing, just one weird detail, is the J shop they have there. They closed every other J shop around. I used to go to the Eaton Center all the time and buy my J stuff there, and they close at 6 o'clock. You can access it from inside the stadium when the game's going on, but you can't access it from outside the stadium, which to me is the dumbest thing I've ever heard. Like you can't go to a store at 5:30, 6 o'clock to buy a jersey. Like it's just little things like that they need to kind of fix. But
They also need to
overall,
bring back. Sorry, go ahead.
yeah, I was saying overall, it's a better experience. I like the fact they've lessened the seating capacity a little bit. The other thing that he should have done that he didn't do in that top, and when they redid the top section, is they made the seats bigger, but they kept the area of the seat the same. So like you're 2 inches closer to that bar. So somebody like me who's 6'5", I had a hell of a time in those seats beforehand with my knees going on that bar. Give me another 2 inches, and my knees are like literally pressing against it now. It's another small thing he should have done that he didn't do. And the one thing he needs to do, the only thing left that he can do with the Sky Dome, and this is something this is my personal proposal for what they do, is you get rid of the stupid hotel, because no one goes to the hotel anymore. It's a crappy hotel as it is. You blow out the back area and you do like the Yankees do and have because we're getting up on 50 years now with the team, right? You have like a museum type thing that is
Monument
outside,
Park, yeah.
like something like Monument Park, and do that out there. And now the team needs to start going into their history, I think, a little bit more now, because we are approaching 50 years. Right?
Rogers has made it very, very clear. Like there's the level of excellence, but honestly, that's like having a nameplate outside your office.
Yeah, like retire a number. Retire 37. Dave Stevens, should be retired by now.
Hasn't gone well for them for the most part.
But don't even get me started on that.
You think about how many statues are inside or outside of the stadium? 1.
Yeah, and it's Ted.
Who is that statue? Ted Rogers. It's ridiculous. So yeah, I'm with you. Like They do need to do that. They should have done that 15, 20 years ago, and they won't.
I think they'll do something for 50. They always do like big round numbers and stuff like that. But
I think it'll just be like, we're going to cart the guys out on the field. And remember this guy? Yeah, he was cool. Give it up for him. Because that's all they've done for decades. I'm with you. They should do it. It needs to be done. I'm not confident with these guys, especially it will be done.
That's all that's left for them to do, because there's nothing they can do to fix the problem from this season to next season. Nothing Mark Shapiro can do. There's nothing he can do. You when you have that gap in their minor leagues, like I said, you can buy all your Anthony Santander's, a couple starting pitchers, all the guys to make your team really good next year. But like unless you have like you said, that whole train of players coming through, it's not going to matter. You're gonna have the same problems. You're gonna have the same problems over and over and over again.
They will need to spend money to acquire players, and I suppose trade some of the guys that they just got. Right, to potentially fill in those holes, but that's not sustainable either, right? Like, we've done this.
Well, why didn't they get any pitching? This is the one thing. The only thing of the trade, like, we got some decent players from the trade deadline, but I don't understand why we didn't go for more pitching.
You know what?
Because that's our biggest problem right now, is we don't have pitching depth.
You bring that up, and I made a mistake. Earlier I said the draft. They drafted mostly positional players. I messed up, and I just realized, because of what you just said. Yeah, I think it was every or virtually every player that they got via trade at the deadline was a position player. Yes,
which is what they don't need.
Jen, you've been a pretty, and I think everybody on this panel would agree, it's very unlikely that Shapiro and Atkins, or sorry, Shapiro, I already corrected myself.
Hey, we get to keep Vladdy, so I'm cool.
I think we're all in agreement that Shapiro and Atkins will keep their jobs into 2025. Is there anything they can do this offseason to give them a second chance, or to, change your opinion or the heat on their seat, and feel better about where this team's outlook is for 2025?
I think the average fan would say if they extended Vlad. But A, I don't think that's going to happen. And B, you can't extend him and then not build around him, because he can't win a ball game. I mean, I suppose with one, but generally speaking, he's not going to win a ball game all by himself, right? And so I want to see them actually assemble a team that you look at and you say, yes, they addressed the need at third base. They addressed the need in left field. They added a starting pitcher and not a number 5 guy, right? They've added a legitimate starter. They've added 2 legitimate bullpen pieces. That's a lot. That's a lot of heavy lifting here, right? And at least one of the position players has to be a solid bat, then I say, if you can look at that and say, okay, this is what I would have wanted last season, let's ride, then maybe they've bought themselves some goodwill or whatever. But what I wonder too is, the working under the knowledge of only having 1 year left. Right? Mark Shapiro knows contractually, as we sit here today, he has 1 year left. Are you working to save your job, or are you working for the next job?
I don't know if he's fearful of losing his job, though. And
I don't know that he is either.
The reason I bring that up is because of what you said, which is, he's baseball operations. He's not the GM, and you're 100% correct. And that kind of opened my eyes. And he's the construction foreman. He's like, hey, look at how fancy and shiny the stadium is.
He also, sorry to interrupt, he also has the trust of ownership, in terms of when he goes to ownership and says, we want to spend this money on this player. I do think he has the ear of ownership. Will he still?
Well, that's a very good point. And what you were just saying before I jumped in, the focus has been, loony dog days. Let's just get younger people out. Let's renovate. Let's make it a more fun family experience, et cetera, et cetera. We've all talked about that. I'm thinking, because of hearing you both say these things that I didn't really consider previously, What if the concern isn't so much from the front office of building a winner? It's simply getting people into the seats and making it more like, for lack of a better comparison, an amusement park like Canada's Wonderland or something like that. And winning is secondary or
No. See, okay. This is the biggest thing that I have with talk when you look online, especially on X. All these people who say that Rogers is just in it just to make money and they're not really in it for a winner. What's going to make you money? A winner is going to make you money. You're gonna have more people watching, which means better advertising dollars right off the bat, right? It doesn't make sense for them not to want the team to win.
I'm not
Anybody
saying
who
they're trying to tank.
no,
I'm
no,
not.
no, no. I don't see, but it just goes back to a greater point that I see all the time. It's one of the biggest things that and that people hate Buck as a broadcaster, which is another ridiculous whatever. People just have these do or die ideas about things, and it's not as cut and dried as everybody seems to make it think it's going to be. You know what I mean? So there's leeway there for them, maybe. Um, I don't like the fact that Shapiro and Atkins have been together since 2001 or what like they've been
Wow,
together like as a team going back to Cleveland, almost 20 years maybe.
that's great. I did not know it had been that long. And
That's why that's part of the reason people don't like them is because they say, oh, they're going to do just like they did with Cleveland. They just don't really do anything. They make them just good enough to be all right, but not good enough to win. And that's been their Achilles the entire time. Because it's true. None of their teams have been to the world. Well, no, sorry. The Indians
60.
made it to the world, right? The
Yeah.
Indians made it once in
Yeah,
20
no,
years,
I'm with
right?
you. And again, I'm not saying you're saying this. I'm not saying there's no focus on winning. I just don't think it is as much of a focus as it needs to be. Or if I'm incorrect, which is very possible, my ex-wife will tell you that,
Mhm.
they're not the right guys. And that's,
No.
I think, exactly what you're saying, where it's like, okay, so, it's 1st and 10 or 3rd and 10. So you need 10 yards. Well, these guys will get you 8 yards,
Yeah.
They're not the right guys.
No, and that's the thing. I think Shapiro has a better chance of staying than Atkins does. I can see this as maybe being the first time they break the two of these guys up. And honestly think it'd be better for both of them in general to do that, just for their own personal sake. Because every year that goes by, they're the same. They're Shatkins or whatever the fans call them. They're gonna have that moniker until they win something or they split up. And I think it's best for them to split up. And I honestly would just put James Click into the GM spot. I mean, I think it's pretty simple.
How much influence do you think he's had, though, to this point that would make? And I'm not asking this in
Look
any
at the Houston trade. Look at
sarcastic.
what we got for Yusei Kikuchi. We fleeced Houston,
Okay.
leased them on that
Oh, yeah.
trade, right?
Yes,
And I
absolutely.
think James Click had something to do with it because of some of the players that he had, right? I think he has more say than because he's just kind of nobody really knows what he does, right?
That's exactly. I think
So
we're
I think
saying.
he's like a consultant, another part of the conglomeration of people that talk about what's going on. But I think as things have gone forward, I personally think he's getting more. He's getting more things listened to than he would have before because Atkins has made a lot of questionable or wrong moves. Clicks won a World Series, like maybe we need somebody there who's won the World Series, not somebody who hasn't or hasn't won a playoff game the entire time he's been here. It was in the World Series once in 10 or so years when he was with Cleveland. Like they're decent Atkins is a decent baseball executive, but like I told you guys, before we started, it's like watching an AI robot. That's what he is. He just platitudes about stuff. He doesn't have any specifics about anything.
He's
And I
not.
think
He's not like that behind the scenes, for the record.
you know what? He's like a utility. He comes off like a utility player, like the players he wants. Like he a little bit of everything, but not really good
All
at any one
right.
thing. You know what I mean?
We gotta move on. I know we all hate them and we know we want them replaced, but we are running out of time.
I'm sorry.
Long
I
toss.
do have to jump in a few minutes. I apologize.
No worries, Pat. We'll take it home. Just feel free to log off whenever. Appreciate you having taking the time this Sunday afternoon, and happy to report somebody did say you were sexy at this point in the chat. So,
What is his name?
oh man, I would have to scroll so far back at this point to find
I
it.
will do some sleuthing, and I'll tell you whether he's in his 70s or his 80s.
So now,
Perfect.
am I the only? Is it just us bearded guys now? We're the ones that are
Nope,
getting.
nope. You got one too. Some reason I did not. That was weird, but it's okay.
Thanks, buddy. Whoever you are, buddy. Pretty sure it's a buddy.
Do want to keep this brief, but I do think it's very interesting, and I would love to get your guys' take. Pat, why don't you take us home before you got to log off here? What do you need to see the last 6 weeks of the season to call these last 6 weeks a success?
Obviously, it's not the type of success that any fan of the team was hoping for prior to the season. As I mentioned earlier, I mean, my two things, I want to see Vladdy finish strong. It's not going to happen in season, but before next season, I would like to see him sign a long-term contract. As mentioned, I would like to see Spencer Horwitz continue to produce. I am pretty high on him, and I think he could be a long-term solution, presumably at second base. And then, and Joey Votto. I want to see Joey Votto make his debut in the Red Series, and I'd like to see him be successful. I do think that this is his last season. It'd be really, really nice for him to. And I was listening to the radio, and someone said, I forget who it was. No, it was Eric Smith, who actually is the Raptors commentator, former neighbor of mine. He came over once, super, super nice guy. Any of those who are familiar, he thought that Votto might play like the 3-game series and then retire. I doubt it. I'd like to see him, have some success here and feel the love from all of his Canadian fans. He's a Toronto boy. He obviously loves the city loves him. So I think I would kind of leave it at that, I suppose.
I love it. Jeff, same question, man.
I like the Votto thing too. There's so many people online who really think it's the worst idea ever. They're like, why would you want to bring Joey Votto? Like he's I'm like, is he any worse than some of the guys we got? The only thing it does is maybe takes away a 40-man roster spot. So big deal. Vladdy has to keep hitting the way he's hitting. I think Barshow needs to come around on the bat a little bit more for me. He's again a really streaky dude. He got a couple hits today, plus with a home run. I hope he finishes with 20 to 25. I hope Bo gets back to at least show maybe in the last few weeks that he's fine, and then he starts hitting the way he can hit. Horowitz keeps developing. Alejandro Kirk keeps hitting so he can be our defensive first catcher next year. And I want to see some of these bullpen guys actually do all right, because with the amount of guys we got injured, some of these newer guys we've gotten aren't that bad. Ryan Burr's been all right. Brendan Little's been all right. These guys haven't really looked at a place. So I would like to see some of these bullpen guys really do a good job towards the end of the season to show us that we might have a bullpen next year. Other than that, I think Gosman's Gosman now. Barrios is probably our best pitcher. Gosman seems to have lost his splitter a bit this year. The movement's not the way it was, and he's getting hit harder. Bassett is definitely a all or nothing kind of guy. And like Jen said, we don't need don't bring another number 5 and bring a number 3 in. And I want to see Yariel Rodriguez finish off the season strong, because since he had the injury, they always thought he was going to be done by about August and throw him in the bullpen. Because of that long time off of the injury, I think we might be able to push him being on the starting rotation going forward. And Bowden Francis. There's so many things that have to go right for me to feel good about next year, because so many people underperformed. But if those happen and they all seem to perform really well, I'll feel better going into next year that we at least have a good nucleus.
Jen, is there anything that can happen in these last 6 weeks to, salvage a lost season? I do think the whole Votto thing, anybody being against it is kind of silly not to. I've always said that, it's bigger than baseball, and having him retire in that way would be really cool for me personally. But is there anything that you would like to see that hasn't been touched on that would feel, just a speck of feel good?
I mean, the original question was, what would you like to see to call the rest of the season a success? And I'm going to say there's nothing that would make this season successful in any way, shape, or form. So we need to take that word out. And I think the answers that everyone has already given is what would be nice to see. And I agree with everything that has been said. It would be nice to see Yariel Rodriguez continue to develop. I think he's a badass on the mound. I really do. I think there's and I also know what the organization thinks of him as well. I think there's real potential there. I would have liked him to, it's a moot point, but I would have liked him to have been left in the game a little bit longer yesterday, because I would have liked to have seen him work his way out after giving he gave up a home run in a single, I believe.
Yep.
In a game where I know what matters to them, the outcome, but in the grand scheme of things, a win or a loss doesn't matter. I would have liked for him to have been left in the game to see if he could work his way out of that, right? Mm-hmm. After having those are the kinds of things that I would like to see. I agree. I would like to see Votto come up, simply because, it's just been hanging in the background the entire season. There was excitement. The idea that he was going to probably get called up, let's say in May, and Vogelbach would be DFA'd, and it's just been injury, recovery. None of it played out the way that I think anybody wanted it to. I do think it would be cool to see him get a few games in a Blue Jays uniform, and then subsequently, this be his last season. Why not at this point? I'm not saying you put him in there every single day and take at-bats away from a guy you need to see, you need to evaluate, but why not? Let him be there. Let him be on the bench, right? But these are all just, what we're talking about now are just feel-good stories in a lost season.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. And I feel like you made a very good point about the word success in this question. I just want to go on record. I did not write these questions myself. That was Scott. So
Scott.
I will absolutely throw him under the bus. But he's the eternal optimist. This is a guy that's a very positive individual. So we'll give him that. Moving along, we got about 20 minutes left. It is time for the Mariners Minute. I would love to discuss it because the Mariners are making recent history tonight by playing the Sunday Nighter for the first time in, I believe, 20 years.
Holy cow, really?
Polanco did a home run. They're up
surprised.
1. Yeah, no, it's been a long time. And I don't understand why. It's a big fan base. It's a supportive fan base.
That's why you're sitting on your couch. You're watching. There you go.
You are absolutely correct. Different location this week for sure, so that I can have the I even changed my position once the game started.
I know you did.
I was wondering about that. Yeah.
I'm just lounging on a Sunday. Don't worry about it. Do you guys think that the Mariners are a contender or a pretender at this point? They've kind of been neck and neck with Houston for the last month and a half. Obviously, they lost that Big Ten game lead that they had built up when Houston was struggling, but the rotation is strong. They're starting to hit better. They've played some decent baseball against some decent teams. Taking 2 out of 3 from Philly. They're going for the sweep against the Mets right now, who have a winning record and have played well ever since Grimace made an appearance. Jeff, do you think that the Mariners have a real shot at playoff success? Maybe not a World Series, but playoff success. And playoff success for this team is winning 1 series.
No, I do. They've got the pitching, first of all. And that's the biggest thing that any team needs. You need your pitching. And you guys, like 1 through 5, maybe one of the best starting rotations in baseball, right? The biggest thing has been the hitting. If Julio Rodriguez can kind of step it up again, because I know he was kind of not doing the greatest for a while there, but he just came back to the injured list, didn't he?
Yeah, he was out for 3 weeks. Tonight's actually his first game back, and he is DHing tonight.
So, if he can hit the way he can hit, if Justin Turner can have his that revitalization like he's had, he hit a grand slam for you guys at one point already. He hit it double in the game. Yeah, exactly. Right. So, if Mitch Garver can maybe start hitting a little bit, because that's asking a lot. I know. But I'm just looking at the guys you've got. You have the potential here for sure. With the guys you have on the team, it's just a matter of, are they going to hit? And this season, and it's not just the Mariners, it's all over the place.
Offense is down for sure.
Offense is down all over the place. But I mean, you guys have enough that you can hold your own. So you have the pitching to do it, and you have just enough hitting. I think you guys could win a round or 2 for sure. for sure.
The Sebi says contender if they bring back Jay Buhner, Edgar Martinez, Griffey Jr., and why not throw in Ichiro into that mix as well, along with Randy Johnson and Ken Griffey Sr.
It's not one of those ride or die guys. Like, I don't get baseball fans who are so black and white about things. Baseball is the grayest game you could possibly play. It's a game of failure. It's a game of failing the least. You know what I mean? Like the best guy is hitting 330, and that's one of your better hitters. It's a game of failure. So being all over people for having slumps or doing this, like acting like that, just makes no sense to me. It just doesn't. You know what I mean? So I think these guys have the potential. Jorge Polanco, he can definitely like he's a better hitter than a 204 hitter. Ty France, did you guys get rid of Ty France?
Yeah, he's with he's in Cincinnati now.
Yes,
We
I
left
like
him in the Midwest to rot.
It's funny because he's still in MLB's like you look at stats for Seattle, he's still on the list.
Yeah,
Which is
and
kinda
probably
weird.
towards the top in batting average. Jen, are you buying the Mariners as a contender?
I think they have a shot. Absolutely. I'll admit I'm not up on my Mariners baseball as much as I maybe would like to be to have this discussion with you, but I said it earlier in the season that I thought that they absolutely, had a shot, and I still maintain that. It'll be really interesting the last little bit of the season to see how it goes. But I agree with what Jeff said. The pitching is there.
Like,
Absolutely.
look at these ERAs. Logan Gilbert, 291. Castillo, 343. George Kirby, 313. Bryce Miller, 346. And then your next guy up there is Brian Wu. Has been on there for a bit, 227. Like,
Yes. So
all
I think
these
our
ERAs,
worst ERA is like 3.46 in the
something like
starting
that. Like,
rotation.
the worst one I can see is Gabe Spear, 25 games, 595. Like, there's some bad ones there, but generally the guys who are pitching and the guys who are in the bullpen, like, I mean, they've all got great numbers. Well, Trent Thornton's numbers are usual Trent Thornton numbers, 4.2 and whatever, but he's a serviceable guy. No,
And he started strong too.
you're pitching, and Taylor Saucedo's been doing pretty good for you guys too. And he's an arm that I think people like when we had him for a while. I really hope we were going to keep him because he's got a hell of an arm on that kid.
Underrated for sure.
You guys have the pitching to take you, like you do. Just about the hitting.
And here's hoping. This is the Long Toss, episode 311. I have done a horrible job of plugging this episode, but this coming Thursday at Comedy Bar, Baseball Town Live. We have some great guests. Scott will obviously be there leading the pack. I forgot the other name he told me. Jen, I believe you will be there this Thursday.
Yep.
Which is incredible. And
I'll be in the audience.
Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Jeff.
I'll be in the. I was there last one. I'll be in the audience watching for sure.
Jeff will be in the audience, and I will be
fun.
making my Toronto performance debut. I've never done anything in Toronto performance-wise. I'm really excited to be a part of that panel on Thursday. So
Have you
be
been to
sure to
Toronto
go to
before?
Comedy Bar and get tickets. There are still some on sale right now, comedybar.com. And I hope to see you Thursday night. We have a little bit more time for topics. Sorry, Jeff, you had something.
Have you been to Toronto before?
I have been to Toronto before, yes.
Have you been to, because there's a couple places. If you haven't been to the Horseshoe, I'm going to take you to the Horseshoe. You got to go to the Horseshoe. It is the iconic live music bar in Toronto. It is, the Stones have played there. The Stones, when they rehearse for other concerts, they come to Toronto and they play in the Horseshoe to get themselves better. So
amazing. We're gonna invoice them for the
I am going to
after
take
party.
you to some iconic Toronto places. That's what I want to do when you're here. So
I love it. I love it. We'll definitely coordinate. We got about 15 minutes before we wrap. Jen, did you bring a topic this week?
Yeah, I did. Just a kind of more of a general question, like a what if type question. So assume you can only have one of these types of guys on your bench, okay? Who do you value more? Do you value the guy that can come off the bench late in a game when you're down by 1 or 2 runs, who might be able to, with one swing of the bat, tie the game up? Or do you place more value on the guy that can come off the bench late in the game when you're, say, up by a run and can play stellar defense and prevent the tying run from being scored? If you could only have one on your bench, which one do you place the higher value on?
This is
we'll go
fun.
back
Jeff,
to
I'll
that
let
guy.
you go first because I disagree with you.
I'll caveat this with saying I think it depends on the team. It depends what the team needs. Our team would need would need the hitter. We need the guy who's going to get us some runs. That's because we'll probably be behind most of the time anyway. So we need the guy who can get us ahead. But if we're like a contending team, then I'd be the defense first kind of guy. But for our Blue Jays, like I really did hope Daniel Vogelbach was going to work out. I did, because I wanted that left-handed home run bat off the bench. Because I think that's what we need. We don't have a game-changing bat except for Vladdy. So it'd be nice to have it on the bench. But yeah, and so I understand why you disagree with me, because I think overall for a good team, you want the defense first kind of guy.
I don't even know if it's so much a defense first. For me, I think first of all, it's a great question, and it really comes down to roster construction and what you value more. I'm a firm believer, based off of the hitting strategy in today's game, of all or nothing, low batting average, high power numbers. I think it's really, really hard to score, and I don't know if those hitters are going to come through as often as you need them to add the value you would want out of that roster spot. So for me, I'm going run prevention. I know that's a little bit biased as a Mariners fan. That's about all we can do. But I've always been a sound believer in that 7th, 8th, 9th inning guy going into left field, right field, whatever the position may be, to essentially take you home. I've always hammered home the idea of having a strong bullpen. Don't give up leads, get up 2-0 and find a way to win that way. That's fine. Scoring runs are getting harder and harder, especially as these pitchers get stronger and stronger. You look at a guy like Skeens, who just averages 99 miles an hour on a fastball. It's getting harder to hit. And I think because that's the case, I think we gotta do the best to prevent runs any chance we can. I don't know.
That
Jen,
makes sense.
did you have a take on your question?
Yeah, I think all things being equal, because I wasn't asking it simply within the context of the Blue Jays. Like, obviously, within the context of the Blue Jays, you want a guy who can maybe swing the bat, right? But I think all things being equal, to your point, I think it's more likely that the excellent defender will make the catch you need him to make than the guy coming up that you're pinch hitting, right, is going to get that one swing of the bat. So all things being equal, I would take the guy off the bench you can put in the field.
That's a great topic this week, Jen. Tuesdays with Johnny from the chat says ideally you'd have one of each. Couldn't agree more. I mean, I think that was the cop out.
That wasn't part of the question.
Yeah, that felt like cheating to me personally, but I mean, in an ideal world, yes, we would love to have a defensive and an offensive guy to call on late in a game. Jeff, did you bring a topic, buddy?
Yeah, I'm surprised it hasn't come up through all this talk about management and everything. How much blame do you put on John Schneider this season? Because personally, I don't think he should be getting as much vitriol as he gets, but I want to see what you guys think. Do you think he deserves to come back next year?
Jen, I'm going to let you go first so that I can get more information on John Schneider before I make my determination.
There are times when I do believe he's been outmanaged. There are a few times when I thought it appeared that he was playing checkers while the other manager was playing chess. And I'm sure we can say that about any manager if you watch them continuously through 162 games or multiple seasons or whatever. Okay. There are moves, particularly with the bullpen, that he has made where not only did fans question it before you knew the outcome, but the talking heads were questioning it before the outcome was known. And sure enough, it fell apart, right? So I think that there is work that he needs to do, and maybe it's just a learning curve. I don't really know. The flip side to that is you can only do so much with the roster that you are given, right? You can only do so much. And particularly then when the injuries come in, right? Or the underperformances come in, and you're trying to cobble this together, sometimes almost on the fly. And, it's almost impossible to evaluate him as a manager, because I don't know if you had given him a better roster, right? Or had there not been injuries that decimated the bullpen, how would things have looked, right? You know, winning covers up a lot of ills. And so I think ultimately, if you are pointing the finger, playing the blame game, it has to be on those who constructed the roster, and also potentially on the hitting coaches. Whatever value, whatever extent to which they affect things, that is.
Yeah, I mean, it's a tough question for me to answer because I have not really watched enough to critique his management, and I don't know the team well enough. I do know that I hate Scott Service as a manager, and he is somebody who pulls the wrong strings constantly. I'll go back as far back as, you know, first month of the season. Julio was struggling and has struggled this year, and game came down to the ninth inning. Julio had the day off. They came out and said Julio was definitely getting the day off. He's not going to play. And then instead of pinch hitting him, they pinch ran him in the ninth inning down by one. It's been a lot like that. So I mean, from a management standpoint, it really comes down to those types of decisions. You know, who you go with in a tight game when your bullpen is tired. How do you manage that bullpen? How do you, you know, pinch hit, you know, pull the right strings or not. And it's okay. You're not going to get it right all the time. Sometimes, you know, you're just going to get beat by a good hitter. You know, Harper took Saucedo deep the other day. Stuff happens. These guys are paid a lot of money to play very, very well. And sometimes you're just going to get beat. You can't always make the right decision, but it's tough for me to say with Schneider whether or not he's part of the problem or he's going to be part of the solution. I just don't know.
When you're the one pulling the strings, you're going to pull the wrong strings some of the time,
Yep.
right? Like, just that's absolutely going to happen. But he also hasn't had great strings to pull.
Yep.
You know, that's the issue. And I do think you know, he's the one who has to wear it every single day because he's the one doing these media availabilities pre and post game,
Yep.
right? He's the one who has to answer the tough questions every single day. And not to bring it up, people in the chat, please don't get mad at me for going backwards in this conversation and bringing this up again. But if we just go back to that game where he pulled Barrios early, right? Yep. And whose decision really was that? It doesn't sound like that was really his decision. Yep. And so I don't know necessarily from, you know, game 36 of the season that he's being told what to do. But I do think some of these more crucial decisions have not all been his decision. So I think if the front office goes, he's gone too. I think it's a fresh start top to bottom, and I think that would be fair. I think a new general manager should choose their manager. Yeah.
No, I want to see old school. This is the thing. Like I love Schneider. I think he's a good guy. I think he's good for the organization. He's won championships in the minors, you know, with Vladdy and Bo on a trap. I think there's too much familiarity now.
Yes,
I think
agreed.
You know what I mean? Like they've been with him for what, since 2017, 2018. Like they've been with him forever. And I don't think that's beneficial at this level anymore. What I would like to see, like it's like you said, Jen, I think he did okay with what he was given. And there's only so much you can do with what you're given. But yeah, his bullpen moves have always been suspect generally. But I think he has the capabilities of being a pretty good manager. But going forward, like you said, Jen, get rid of them all.
Yeah.
Bring them in. And I want to see old school. This is the one thing that Toronto never, ever, ever does is bring in the only time they did was Jim Fregosi. It was the only time they brought in a manager who was like an old school guy, you know, somebody who's got a lot of baseball knowledge and stuff like that. Because I think they're always bringing in the new guy. They're always trying the new person. Like Montoya was the new person. John Gibbons was the new person. Jimmy Williams was the new person. Cito Gaston was the new person. Everybody was was the first time manager managing the Jays pretty much. And I would like to see somebody with some experience, like Terry Francona type. I don't think it'd be Francona, obviously, but something like that. Somebody who's got a proven winning record. Same with the GM. Just bring in some people who have that knowledge, who aren't so reliant on analytics. And like you said, Jen, again, with not letting the manager make their own decision. Like, you need that. He needs that autonomy. And the
Mhm.
way it's structured now, he doesn't have that. I can't imagine how frustrating it is to maybe want to do something you can't do because the analytics guys say not to. Baseball has a lot of feel to it. That's why it's not 0 or 1,000. There's so much gray in between that. You never really know what's going to happen. You got to be able to kind of feel how the game is moving. Like, Barrios is the perfect example.
Yep.
He should have stayed in the game. Like, the numbers maybe said he shouldn't have, but the way he was pitching, sure as hell said he should have. Like, not everything's off a computer screen. And I think the Jays rely way too much on their analytics at this point.
Well,
Like, I know people talk about the tablets in the dugout. I kind of get that. I'm okay with the tablet thing, but now I'm seeing like an actual like 4 screens that are up on the wall now, like permanently up there showing stuff. Like, there's just too much.
there is such a thing as information overload for sure.
Exactly.
Because you do then lose your feel for things.
Exactly.
But to kind of bring this full circle, because I've said in the past, because Schneider came up with Vlad and Bo, and at the time Biggio, right?
Mhm.
Like, maybe at some point in a person's development, whether it be as a player on the field or within any work environment, at some point you do need a new voice. You do
Yeah.
need new perspective. You outgrow the people that are maybe telling you what to do. You need something different. And to bring it full circle, I would apply that perhaps to Shapiro and Atkins as well, and their relationship.
Yeah. Just a
All
lot of
right.
unfulfilled potential all the way around. That's all this is. Unfulfilled potential. Thank you, Mark Shapiro.
That is all the time we have. Like I said a few moments ago, Baseball Talent Live this Thursday at Comedy Bar. Get your tickets. Myself and Jen will be on the panel. Jeff will be in the audience. Come say hi. Jeff, where can we find you, bud?
40 at the 4040 men on Twitter, because X is stupid. Instagram, Tallboy Speaks. You can find me there. Eventually, I am slowly but surely cobbling together a podcast, and my podcast is hopefully going to be going retro. And I want to start interviewing past players from the team, because now that we're hitting the 50-year mark, I want to start showing some of the history of this team, because there's a lot of people that don't understand what's gone on with this team all the way up to this point. I'd love to show people the people that were in it before. My number one guy I want to get, Dave Collins. Why do I want to get Dave Collins? Jen, do you know why I want to get Dave Collins?
Nope.
No?
Nope.
He is still the single season steals leader for the Blue Jays. He got 60 steals in 1983, and he is still the single season steals leader. I want to talk to Dave Collins and those big old glasses that he wore. Big old glasses. So that's what's going on with me.
Jen, where can we find you?
You can find me on Twitter at baseball_Jen. That's Jen with 2 N's. You can find me on Instagram too, but that's mostly fitness stuff. And yeah, I'm just as delightful on Twitter as I am on here. Come to Baseball Town, folks.
Yeah.
If you're in Toronto or the Toronto area, come out.
It's so much fun.
Yeah, it's going to be a really good show. Myself, Juan, Scott, Rob Wong will be there.
Ooh.
So come out for chat baseball. Yell at us, heckle us. Come on.
Please heckle us.
Yes.
The tip of the cap to the grounds crew and our producer. Thank you so much for tuning in. If you haven't already, hit the like button, subscribe. We'll see you next week, and hopefully to see you there Thursday night.